Before we get into our conversation tonight, I want to perform a little thought experiment. I want to invite you to close your eyes and imagine that you are shopping at your favorite grocery store. And as you go into the store, the first thing that's on your list is you need to purchase fruit and fresh vegetables. As you enter the store, are you going to go to the left or are you going to go to the right? You're probably going to go to the right first. Now you need to buy meat. So now you need to head to the meat department. Are you heading to the front of the store or to the back of the store to make these collections? You're probably heading to the back. And while you're at it, you remember that you also need to get milk and eggs and butter. And you know those are all centrally located in the same place. And they're probably also near the back of the store, probably in the opposite corner. And you got to pick up a few soft drinks, so you move to the left of the store. You need cereal, so you've got to go to the central aisles. You need frozen foods like ice cream and frozen vegetables. And where are you going to find that? Close to the central aisles as well, maybe one or two over from the cereal aisle. I did this little thought experiment with our congregation a couple of weeks ago, inviting people to shout out the directions as they virtually navigated through their favorite grocery stores. As they were navigating the store, I invited them to shout out the directions that they were taking, and in unison, they were all giving me the same direction. At the end of the thought experiment, I invited them to shout out the name of their favorite store, and they called out at least 4 or 5 different stores. The exercise was designed to help them recognize how grocery stores and all retail businesses for that matter are designed to influence your decision making. And if H-E-B and Walmart can figure out how to influence the choices we make without us even realizing it, we should wonder who else is capable of swaying our decisions. Today, I want to pick up on a conversation that we started last week about the decisions that we make in life, how and why we make those choices, and the impact that those decisions have on our destiny. More than we realize, friends, our choices, especially in the major decisions of our lives, are either persuaded by the past, they're provoked by our present, or they're driven by our destiny. Last week, we saw Joseph's journey from a field slave to becoming the chief operating officer of Potiphar's household and the administrative head of all of his business ventures. By the 5th and 6th verse of chapter 37, things were going exceptionally well for this man. This boy had moved from the country to the most metropolitan city on earth at the time, and he is doing exceptionally well. But no sooner are you celebrating his success that we are introduced to a major problem that Joseph had in the latter part of verse 6. There it says, "Now Joseph was well built and handsome." Now, your initial response to that would be, okay, what's the problem with that? But if you keep reading, you will understand in context that this was an issue. Because verse 7 goes on to say, "And after a while, his master's wife took notice of Joseph and said, 'Come to bed with me.'" You see the problem here, right? Joseph's boss's wife was a cougar, and she was hungry. And apparently Joseph looked like a hot and spicy from McDonald's because she was after him. And friends, here we are talking about choices. That's what this series is about. Friends, something that we all have to understand is that the major decisions that we make in life are presented to us from one of two sources primarily. Some of our choices come from God offering or extending us invitations. These are opportunities that by design are there to help us to grow, to step out in faith. They help us to mature. They bless us and they glorify Him. Now, the other source for our choices many times is Satan. And the Bible calls the alternatives that he offers temptation. The enemy doesn't want you to make your decisions driven by your destiny. I think we all understand that by now, right? He either wants you to be detained by your past, or like those evil grocery store chains today, he wants you to be distracted by the immediate present surroundings. And friends, there are two types of temptations that we are exposed to in life. Let me cover that while we're talking about this. There are those temptations that we chase after, those things that we want, and then those things that chase after us. Which one was Joseph facing in Genesis chapter 39? Verse 10 makes it obvious. It says that Potiphar's wife kept pressuring him day after day, but he refused to sleep with her and he kept out of her way as much as possible. Friends, can I ask you a question? What temptation has been chasing you lately? Is it a certain possession, a certain person, a certain passion? Is it this insatiable desire to have a certain possession in life? Friends, what do you do when it comes to knocking at your door day after day, persistent like Potiphar's wife was with Joseph? What do you do when it catches up with you? 1 Corinthians 10:13 says that no temptation has overtaken you except what is common to mankind. And God is faithful. He will not let you be tempted beyond what you can bear. But when you are tempted, he will also provide a way out so that you can endure it. And I love these verses because it shows me at least 3 or 4 things about how temptation, on the mechanics of resisting temptation, actually works. First of all, it tells me that being tempted is universal. By the way, being tempted is not a sin. It's response to temptation that turns into sin in our lives. Second thing we have to understand about temptation is that whatever we face in life, God has already pre-qualified it as a test that we can pass. And in every situation that he allows to come into our life, he has also built in or installed an emergency exit, a way out of the circumstance. So God gives us a plan for dealing with temptation, but he doesn't make us take that way out. We have to choose it. That's why in the next verse of 1 Corinthians 10 and verse 14, Paul says, "Therefore, my dear friends, flee from idolatry, get away from sin, run away from sin." And that's literally what Joseph did in Genesis chapter 39. In verse 11, it says, "One day, no one else was around when he went to do his work. We know who we're talking about here, she came out and grabbed him by his cloak, demanding, 'Come on, sleep with me.' Joseph tore himself away, but he left his cloak in her hand as he ran from the house." Last week, we saw how Joseph refused to let his decisions be persuaded by his past predicaments. Tonight, what I want you to see is that he didn't allow his choices to be provoked by his present situations either. I think Joseph understood some fundamentals about temptation and sin. I believe that he recognized that sin takes you further than you want to go. It costs you more than you want to pay, and it holds you longer than you want to stay, which sounds a lot like what a lot of retail stores want to do when you go there. And speaking of costing more than you want to pay, can I ask you something? When was the last time you gone to the store to buy 1 or 2 items and you came out with more than what you actually desired to purchase? We've all been there, right? Well, let me ask you something else. Have you ever made a decision in the heat of the moment in terms of relationship or opportunity or possession, and you found yourself paying for it a lot longer than you wanted to pay, dealing with it a lot longer than you wanted to deal, and regretting it for a year or 2 or 5 or 10 or 20 years? Friends, that's the spiritual equivalent of the butterfly effect. Small, insignificant actions like a butterfly flapping its wings in the Serengeti that turns into a hurricane in the Gulf of Mexico. You know, we tend to think about our decisions in life as isolated choices, but when you make the same decision over and over again, it turns into a habit. When you give in to that habit over and over again, it becomes a lifestyle. And when you make those decisions a way of life, it becomes your destiny. By the way, if you are in Christ but you don't see much change in your life, it's probably because you thought that following Christ was a one-time decision. Friends, it's not. It's a daily decision. It's the decision to continue to make the right choices every day, whether easy or hard, convenient or uncomfortable, that determines your destiny. Speaking of hard and uncomfortable decisions, I have to tell you that I am so amazed at Joseph at this stage of his life. You know, it's one thing for Joseph to honor God with his decisions when things were going really well, when he was finding favor and when life was prosperous. But Joseph also made daily godly decisions when things were going bad for him, when he had fallen out of favor with those in power, and when life took an unexpected turn. Because it does. You know what happened to him next, right? Joseph got caught up in the Me Too movement, and Potiphar's wife accuses him of sexual harassment. And in Genesis 39, Potiphar was furious when he heard his wife's story about how Joseph had treated her. So he took Joseph and threw him into the prison where the king's prisoners were held, and there he remained. Friends, though we are largely shaped by the experiences of our past, we are continuously being driven by our daily decisions in the present also. And let me be the first to admit that it's not easy to continue making decisions that honor God, especially in the midst of difficult circumstances. So, okay, I get it. You grew up poor, but it's your decisions today that determine whether you stay in those conditions or not. You fell into that certain area of sin, but that one decision doesn't define you. It is what you do next that defines you, friend. I understand you got a criminal record. You know what? Joseph had a criminal record too. But the choices you make today determine whether that circumstance will be a single chapter in your life or the story of your life. So I'm thinking to myself right now, you're probably wondering, okay, I get it. Daily decisions that honor God. How long? How long do I have to keep making right decisions before my circumstances turn around? How long does a butterfly have to beat its wings in the Serengeti to cause a hurricane in the Gulf of Mexico? How long do you have to pray for that husband before he comes to Christ? How long do you have to forgive that child who seems to just run over you at times? How long do you have to remain on that job when you're being mistreated? To put it in the context of our story, how long did Joseph have to do the right thing to be released from jail? Let me show you a couple of verses that I think answers that question and perhaps your questions as well. It says this, "But the Lord was with Joseph in the prison and showed him his faithful love. And the Lord made Joseph a favorite with the prison warden. Before long, the warden put Joseph in charge of all the other prisoners and over everything that happened in the prison. The warden had no worries because Joseph took care of everything. The Lord was with him and caused everything he did to succeed." There in Genesis chapter 40, it says this, the next chapter, it says, "Sometime later, Pharaoh's chief cupbearer and chief baker offended their royal master. Pharaoh became angry with these two officials, and he put them in the prison where Joseph was, in the palace of the captain of the guard. They remained in prison for quite some time, and the captain of the guard assigned them to Joseph, who looked after them." How long was Joseph in jail? I was trying to do some calculations to figure that out a few days ago, and I thought to myself I was going to be able to figure that out too. I was thinking, okay, I know that he was 17 years old when he was sold into slavery. Next week, we'll discover that he is 30 years old when he becomes prime minister. So 13 years is the time period from him going into slavery and him going into service for the Pharaoh of Egypt. Now, we also know that he worked for Potiphar long enough to get promoted multiple times. So we know it's a few years. So when I did my calculations, you know what I came up with? With no answers. We have no idea exactly how long Joseph was in jail. He was locked up for a minimum of 3 years and as many as 12 years. But here's what I do know, friends. I know that the Lord was with Joseph. If there's one thing that I see over and over again in the latter chapters of Genesis, it's God reminding Joseph that he is with him. And perhaps if there's nothing else that you get out of this message, especially those of you who are in the pit right now, those of you who are in the prison right now, I want to remind you that the Lord is with you, despite what you see around you right now. Now, I also recognize that with every situation that Joseph faced in life, even in the difficult circumstances, he honored God with his decisions. And I believe that the key to your breakthrough, the key to you being released in this season of your life, has to do with your willingness to obey God. And I believe that the same God that lifted Joseph out of that pit and brought him to the palace wants to exalt you, wants to rebuild your marriage, wants to restore your character, wants to take you to the next level. And friends, it's your response to the daily decisions in life that make that possible.